Hello, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be talking about a really useful data type in Python called list. Now, just like you might make a to-do list or a shopping list, a list in Python is a collection of items that have a specific order. You can also add items to lists, remove them, or change them, making them a really versatile data structure. Here are our goals for today's video. By the end, you'll be able to create lists and add to them using the append function, index a list using slicing syntax, access or modify elements within a list, sort items in a list, and finally check for elements in a list. Let's try making some lists. When we want to create a list in real life, we either have to take out a piece of paper and a pen or open up our app. When we want to create a list in Python, we need to initialize our list. So there are two ways of initializing a list in Python. The first way is using square brackets. So I am going to write the name of our list variable, which is empty underscore list. Then I'm going to write the assignment operator and two square brackets. So that's the first way to initialize our list. And the second way is using the list function. So again, I'm going to write the name of our variable, empty underscore list, followed by the assignment operator. And then I'm going to write the word list and two round brackets, which is calling the list function. And that's the second way to initialize the list. So now to show you what our list looks like, we can print it to our console. So I'm going to write print and then empty underscore list. And then to run that, I'm going to press Shift and Enter. So here we can see two square brackets, which is our empty list. Suppose we already know the elements that we want our list to contain, we can initialize our list with them from the beginning. So let's say I want to create a list that stores some cities in Canada. So I'm going to write our variable name, which is city underscore list, followed by the assignment operator and two square brackets. And in these square brackets, I'm going to write the elements of our list. So in double quotes, I'm going to write the first element, which is Toronto, followed by a comma. Commas are used to separate elements in lists, which is really important to remember. Then I'm going to write Ottawa, followed by a comma to separate our second element, and finally I'm going to write Montreal. I can see the contents of our list by printing city list to our console. So I'm going to press Shift and Enter, and there's our list. So lists don't only need to contain strings. They can store any data type you want. So for example, lists can store numbers. So I'm going to create a variable num list, followed by the assignment operator, and in square brackets, I'm going to write some numbers. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can also write a list that stores booleans. So I'm going to write a variable called boolean list, and in it, I'm going to store some booleans. So true, true, and then false. So now we can print our list just to make sure that we wrote them correctly. So I'm going to print our numbers list, and underneath, I'm going to print our boolean list. Cool, so it looks like we did that right. Lists in Python are super versatile. So they can actually store multiple data types together in a single list. So let's write a list that contains multiple data types. I'm going to call this mixed underscore list. And in square brackets, I'm going to throw in a word, Toronto, and then I'm going to throw in a number and a boolean. So let's print that list to our console. Cool, there it is. We can also initialize a list with variables that we create. So let's say that we have two variables, x and y. To the variable x, I'm going to assign the value hello, and to the variable y, I'm going to assign the value world. So now I'm going to create a variable called combined underscore list, and I'm going to write the assignment operator, square brackets, and inside the square brackets, I'm going to write x, comma, y. And now let's print the list to the console to see what it looks like. So here we have a list containing hello and world, which are the values stored in the variables that we've created. So here I've written some variables for each of the possible moves in the game rock, paper, scissors. So I've written out the variables and I've assigned some values to them, and I want you to create a list of all the possible moves in the game rock, paper, scissors. So take a minute to pause the video and try this exercise out yourself, and I'll come back with the solution in a bit. Moves, we have to remember to execute the cell with all the variables so that we initialize them and the computer knows what they are. So in our cell that contains all the variables, I'm just going to press Shift and Enter. Okay, now the computer knows what we're dealing with. So to write a list of all the possible moves, I'm going to create a variable called possible underscore moves, followed by the assignment operator and our handy dandy square brackets. In these square brackets, I'm going to write the variables rock, comma, paper, comma, scissors. And now I can print our list to the console. So I'm going to print and then possible underscore moves. And when I press Shift and Enter, we see that the output is a list containing the words rock, paper, and scissors. Now that we know how to initialize lists and put elements in them, let's look at some of the other properties of lists. Remember that for strings, we could find out how long a string was using the len function. We can also use the len function to figure out how many elements we have stored in a list. So I'm going to create a list called my underscore list, and in it I'm going to put some numbers in there like 10, 11, and 12. So first I'm going to print my list to the console, and now I'm going to print the length of my list. So I'm going to do that by writing print, and in round brackets I'm going to write the word len, followed by another pair of round brackets, and in those brackets I'm going to write my list. And I'm going to run that by pressing Shift and Enter. So here on this first line, we see our list that we created, and on the second line, we see the number 3, which is the number of elements we stored in our list. Earlier on in this video, we learned how to create some empty lists. Now those probably aren't going to be very useful, but what we can do is add elements to the list that we've already created, and we do this using the append function. So first I'm going to create an empty list called myList, then I'm going to print the list to the console just to prove to you that it's empty. Then I'm going to add an element to the list using the append function. So I'm going to write the name of the list, my underscore list, dot, and then the word append, followed by 2 round brackets. And in those round brackets, I'm going to write the element that I want to add to my list. So I want to append the string item. And finally, I'm going to print my list to the console so you can see that we've added something. All right, let's run that. So here on the first line, we have an empty list. And then on the second line, we now have a list that has the element that we added. Just like with strings, we can also add items to a list using the addition symbol. So I'm going to create a list called myList, and I'm going to have some elements in that list. So I'm going to put 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now I'm going to add the number 6 to the list, and the way I do that is I write the name of the list, so my underscore list, and then I write the addition symbol and the assignment operator, and then I write the value that I want to add to the list. Now here it's really important to remember that when we add to a list using this method, the element needs to be in a list itself. And I'll show you in a bit why we need to do it this way. We can also add multiple elements to a list at the same time using this method. So I'm going to write the name of our list, followed by plus and the assignment operator, and then I'm going to write a list with the elements 7 and 8. So now if we print our list to the console and we run it, we see that our list now contains 6, 7, and 8. So let's take a look at what happens if we try and add a single element to our list using the addition method. So I'm going to create a list again called my list, and I'm just going to initialize it to what we had before. And then I'm going to add the number 6. But I'm not going to put it in square brackets this time. So here we get a type error. So it's always important to remember that when you're using the addition method that you put your elements in a list. In the strings video, we learned how to index and slice a string. Well, the good news is that we can use the exact same methods on lists. So if we want to access specific elements in a list, we can use the same indexing operations that we did on a string. So I'm going to create a list called numbers, and I'm going to throw some numbers in there. So to access the last number, we would index the last element of our list. So I'm going to create a variable called last number, and then I'm going to reference the name of our list. And then to access the last element in square brackets, I'm going to write -1. So let's print that to the console so we could see what value last number contains. And it contains 5, which is the last element in our list. We can also slice different segments of our list. So I'm going to create a variable called 2 to 4. which is going to contain the second, third, and fourth elements of our list. So to do that, I'm going to write the name of our list, and in square brackets, I'm going to write 1:4. So remember that when we index lists, we start at 0, and the number after the colon isn't included. So it's always 1 minus this position. So let's print this variable to the screen to see what we have. So here we have a list containing 2, 3, and 4, which are the second, third, and fourth elements of our list. And when we slice the list, it'll form a list itself. So this creates like a mini list. So some more good news, lists in Python aren't permanent. You're always able to modify them, but you have to be careful in the way that you do that. Let's create a list, again, called numbers. And again, I'm just gonna put in the numbers from 1 to 5. And let's say I want to increment the first element in our list, so the number 1, by 1. So first I'm going to try by creating a variable called first number, and I'm going to assign to it the first element in our list, which is numbers 0. Then I'm going to increment the first number by 1, so I'm going to write first underscore number plus the assignment operator and then 1. So the question is, did this change the value in our original list? Well, let's print it and find out. So first I'm going to print the variable first underscore number, and then I'm going to print our list numbers. So the variable first number did in fact change to 2 like we wanted, but it didn't change our original list. The reason this happened is because when we created the variable first number, we created a copy of the item in the list. So this variable isn't referencing the item in the list itself, but rather it's referencing a copied version. So it won't actually modify our list. If we do want to modify the element in the list itself, we index the element in the list. So I'm going to write the name of our list, square brackets, and then 0, because that's our first element, and then I'm going to add 1 to it. So I'm going to write the plus sign, assignment operator, and then the number 1. So let's print our list numbers to see if it did in fact change. So here we have our numbers list, and we can see that the element in the first position did increment by 1. So if you want to modify a list, you have to remember to access the elements in the list directly. All right, so let's try another exercise to test our knowledge and practice. So here we've given you a list that keeps track of the score in a match of rock, paper, scissors. So the first element in our list is for player A, and the second element in our list is for player B. So player A just won a new match, and we need to increment the score for player A. So your job is to write the code needed to increment the score for player A by 1. So feel free to pause the video and work on this on your own, and I'll check back with you in a bit. All right, so if we want to increase the score of player A by 1, the first thing we need to do is access the element in our list. So player A's score is the first one, so to access their score, I am going to write the name of the list, which is current underscore score, and then in square brackets, I'm going to write 0. Now to update it, I am going to increment it by 1. Now let's print our score list to the screen to see if we incremented it correctly. Oh, and that's my mistake. I forgot to run the cell that had the list current score, so the computer doesn't know what current score is. So first I have to run that, and now I can run the code that we just wrote. So here we can see our new list, which now contains the correct score for player A and also player B, whose score was already at 1. If we have a list that contains strings or numbers, it's often super useful to sort them. And we can do that using the sort function. So I'm going to create a list called alphabet, and in it I am going to put some characters of the alphabet in random. So I'm going to put M, maybe a T, A, G, and C. So now to sort our list, I am going to write the name of our list, dot, and then the word sort, followed by 2 round brackets. So now our list should be sorted, and let's print it to the console to make sure that it did that. So here we can see that our list alphabet now has the characters in the correct order. Now there's one catch. I said you can sort lists containing numbers and lists containing letters, but you can't sort lists containing both. And this is because comparison operations only work between data types that are the same. So I'm going to prove this to you. I'm going to write a list called mixed underscore list, and then I'm going to write the string 1, followed by the number 2, followed by the string 3, followed by the number 4. So now I'm going to try and sort this by writing mixed underscore list dot sort. Now when I try and run this, I get an error. Remember that with a string, we can check whether or not a character appeared in the string using the keywords in and not in. We can also use the same keywords to check whether or not an element is in a list. So I'm going to create a list of Canadian cities. So I'm going to call my list Canada. And then inside the list, I'm going to write a few cities. So Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal. Now I want to check whether or not the city New York is found in the list Canada. I am going to type the print function because I want to print the output to our console. And then I'm going to write the string New York in Canada. And here we get the output false because New York is not in the list Canada. Now let's make sure that the city Los Angeles is not in Canada. So to do that, I'm going to write print and then city Los Angeles. And then I'm going to write the keyword not in and then the name of our list, which is Canada. So let's run the cell again. And we see that the output of this is true. Let's try one more exercise to make sure that we understand these concepts super well. So let's say I'm playing a game of rock, paper, scissors, and I know that rock, paper, and scissors are all valid moves, but I want to know whether this is super rock, paper, scissors, and I can use my favorite move, which is snake. So I want you to tell me whether or not snake is a possible move in the rock, paper, scissors game. Now remember, in exercise 1, we've already initialized a list of variables that contain possible moves. Take a second to pause the video and try this exercise out for yourself, and I'll be back in a bit. So to figure out whether my favorite move is a legit move in our rock, paper, scissors game, I am going to write the word print, and then I'm going to check whether the variable that I created, move, is in the list that we created earlier. So I'm going to write move in possible moves. So first I have to remember to initialize our variable move for the computer so that it knows what the variable is. And then I can run the code that we just wrote. So unfortunately, the output is false, meaning that my favorite move is not a move in the possible moves in our rock, paper, scissors game. Let's go over what we learned in today's video. Today, we learned how to create lists, add to them, and modify them, as well as sort them and check whether or not an item's in a list. Great work, you guys. See you in the next video.